Hi, everybody. Welcome to NewsNite for Friday, May 4th. Great to have you with us this week. A local deputy is fired. Where was the supervision when he was making inmates dance? Will new legislation make an impact on roadside memorials or in Columbus when it comes to texting while driving? Those issues and more next on NewsNite. A record week when it comes to high temperatures, hopefully just as heated of conversation this week. Let's meet our panel. Ed Esposito is here this week from WAKR. Great to have Steve Hoffman with us this week from the Akron Beacon Journal. And always great to see freelance journalist and contributor Jody Miller here with us this week. The deputy's name is Dominic Martucci. He's out of a job. Reports say that he made inmates dance. I don't know if this was for fun or for benefits or for what, but my question is, where was the supervision? Because deputies shouldn't be doing this.
Well, where was the supervision? They fired him. Isn't that the supervision?
Well, he did this more than once, it sounds like.
Well, they were the supervision.
Yeah, they were the supervision. So you had to have supervisors overlooking the supervisors and the supervisors. They found out about it. They took the appropriate action.
But they didn't find out about it from within the force itself. That sheriff's deputies, it was an inmate, in fact, who sent a memo, if I'm not mistaken, to some higher-ups and said this is what happened.
Yeah, I mean, in some respects, this is kind of innocent. You know, these inmates could regain privileges that they had lost by dancing. Apparently, this Martucci was using his cell phone to play an Usher song, and they were dancing. So it sounds relatively harmless, but in the context of what's gone on in that jail, the incidents that have brought unwanted attention, the staffing issues, everything that's gone on there, it's just, you know, this is not the right time to be pulling anything that even resembles an activity like that. I mean, this is a time to go by the book and just not fool around. And it's too bad because it gives people the impression that it's that the supervision is, shall we say, needs supervision.
Yeah, but I mean, it's not Abu Ghraib. It's Dominic's dance party. So, so I mean, again, it's not a serious thing, but it is serious. I mean, I think you have to give the sheriff credit for, this is conduct on becoming an officer, and you're not supposed to treat inmates like this. I think some of the inmates probably would have said, "What? I can get my privileges back for busting a move and being a robot? This is great." So, it's kind of lighthearted. It's kind of party time, but in the jail, it's not the right venue for that.
So does the crime fit the punishment here? Did he deserve to be fired over something like this?
Well,
I think he does.
The appeals process will go through that, but I would agree with Jody, yeah.
Why do you say that, Jody?
Because, again, it's based on what my colleagues have said here, what has gone on at that jail in the past couple of years. And don't go back to the Mr. McCullough incident, where the inmate was died at the jail.
And Martucci was involved in
Martucci was one of the deputies who was involved in that. And there are staffing problems there. There is a series of morale problems that we have all heard about at the jail. And I think Drew Alexander was wise because this is not the kind of conduct you want to have at that jail. And I think he did what he had to do. And I think if nothing else, it sends a message that, this is a jail, this is a professional operation, and we will treat people with dignity and respect. Regardless of why they're there, they deserve dignity and respect.
Why was he still at the jail? That's one of the questions I ask. If he was one of the guys that went through this within the McCullough case, why can't we rotate some of these guys in the jail out in the streets for a few years, rotate some of the guys in the streets into the jails so that everybody's getting a little bit of variety? Because it sounds to me like, a long enough time in the jail, you're going to start to get punchy.
Well, that's a good question, but, the flip side of that is you go through a lot of money and effort to train jail guards. You just can't bring somebody who's done patrol duty and say, okay, you're a jailer all of a sudden. Whole different world, whole different the point of responsibilities and training, and that's expensive. So, I think you can make an argument that we have so much invested in our jailers here that, to your point about, rotating them out, this is not regular duty. This is not patrol duty. It'd be similar to getting someone on the bomb squad or the dive squad.
Right. I think you'd get some pushback in the sense that the deputies who have moved on and are now they're on patrol or they're in a special unit, I would guess that none of them wants to go back and do a stint in the jail. They would much rather be out doing something than cooped up.
Because if you're a jailer, you're in jail too.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. So I think it would be, there would be some morale issues. Maybe the union would get involved. I'm not sure exactly what the rules are about who's assigned to what in the sheriff's union, but they'd find something. They would go through every page of the contract until they found something.
Well, and I have to admit, I've known Dominic his whole life. He comes from a marvelous family. Obviously, his grandfather was a city councilman in Fairlawn for years and years. His father was very active on and a very respected member of the Akron Police Department. And Dominic has always wanted to be in the safety forces. And I just feel bad for him. It just showed a tremendous amount of poor judgment.
Well, I know from the military, we go through these periods of efficiency where you can only be in an assignment so long, where they feel like, the stress is so much you need to go out of there. And I've talked to deputies at the Summit County Jail who tell me, they're at a breaking point. Mm-hmm. They need a new assignment. They need to get out of the jail. This is not what they want to dedicate their whole careers to. But those options may not be on the table. One thing the local police have been on the lookout for are these roadside memorials. City Council in Akron enacted new legislation to take some of these down after 45 days. We've all seen them at the scenes of car crashes or murders and things, and people are very emotional about them, but sometimes they stay up for very, very long periods of time. Is 45 days a good way to go about this?
I think it's a good compromise, personally. After 45 days, anything is going to get well worn and used if it's exposed to the weather. And I think it gives the people who are providing the items for the memorial an opportunity to do so and to recognize a very tragic event. But in the same sense, I think it's enough. Enough is enough, and we've seen them, and they really look awful after a period of time. So yes, it's one way of remembering and memorializing what has happened in that location, but I think 45 days is plenty of time.
I agree with Jody. I think it's important to point out, and I'll probably get in trouble for saying this, but when you fly a flag at half-staff because a political leader or a soldier is killed in action in war that lasts for 30 days, 45 days on a public right-of-way is enough.
Yeah, they did this under a nuisance ordinance, which is basically what it is. It's appropriate. The stuff will be bagged up and held. I can't remember for how long.
For 2 weeks.
So if people have, if they've got to have the teddy bear back, they can do that. I think the problem, a lot of this came, as I understand it, from the block watches, who just saw, a proliferation of these things.
Kind of making the neighborhood look ratty.
Yeah, and it just, it does. It kind of. And then it's a reminder, in some neighborhoods, it's a reminder that, hey, a whole lot of bad things have happened on this street, which is not exactly what you want to see either.
Is there a better way, then, to have something more centralized or more permanent for memorials?
Well, as Marco Somerville said, this is what, cemeteries are for. That's how you memorialize a loved one. That's the appropriate spot. That's what people do, so.
I think it's a sensitive compromise. You're not telling people they can't do it. You're not saying the only place you can do it is in a cemetery. You are marking a spot where a loved one died, so the government is being sensitive to it. They're also being sensitive to the needs of the community, that you don't junk up the right-of-way. The Devil's Strip is not a cemetery. The Devil's Strip is not a memorial. It's not a memorial area.
Okay, we'll see how it plays out in 45 days when they start to take them down and talk about it right here on NewsNite.
For more NewsNite content, including extended discussions, full interviews, and the chance to speak your mind about the issues, join us online at newsnight.net.
The eyes of the nation again turn to Northeast Ohio for all the wrong reasons. The FBI busts 5 guys this week who could have pulled off what would have been the single biggest act of domestic terrorism since Oklahoma City, and it would have been right here in Summit County. I don't know if I can find the right words to say shocked enough as to most people were that this plot was uncovered and came so close.
Mm-hmm. Knuckleheads.
Yeah, they were pretty disorganized group. I guess they had some affiliation with the Occupy Cleveland movement.
Well, they had more than an affiliation
with
them. They were down there in a tent, and they were saying they worked for them.
And they were upset when the Occupy Cleveland group didn't want to get more violent and wanted to be peaceful.
Right.
So
and the permit's been yanked. The City Hall in Cleveland yanked the permit. I guess that was in the works before this incident.
We'll talk about the Occupy folks in a moment. What should happen with these guys? Is this a group that they're going to
jail for life?
They're going to get hammered.
Yeah.
So, these guys. Their own ineptitude is what stopped them. I mean, there was an FBI informant involved, and they were being watched carefully and all that stuff. But from what I've read, these guys were just, I mean, like they didn't want to climb on the bridge to place the explosives. You know?
This was the gang who couldn't shoot straight, to be honest. They wanted to make a statement, obviously, but they were also adverse to hurting anybody. You know, they didn't want to climb up on the bridge. They were going to put pylons on the bridge to make sure there was no traffic. You know, they were looking for a way to make a statement. But the thing that we have to understand is that they bought what they thought were explosives. They put them on the bottom of the bridge, and they left and tried through a cell phone to activate the explosion.
They pressed the button.
They pressed the button.
When the defense attorneys now are talking about how these, are poor, troubled young men, which by all rights, when you look at their histories, they are. I mean, these are pretty screwed up individuals. But having said that, they pressed the button. I mean, I don't care how screwed up they are. They sat there and they knowingly, they thought, press the button. They entered the codes and said, good, boom. I mean, in the court of law, do you know the difference between right and wrong? Yes. You press the button. Go to jail. Don't get out.
Well, it will be interesting though, because I think from what we're hearing from at least the attorney from the one young man, they're going to try to present a situation of entrapment where these guys were kind of thinking about this, they were talking about doing it, and then there was an informant and an FBI kind of an informant who did whatever they could to maybe lead them on. And this is where I think the one attorney is going in terms of, well, he never would have gone through with this if it hadn't been presented to the point where they could get him the explosives, or they could pay them the money, or they could do whatever happened to be. So I think it'll be interesting to see how, in fact, the attorneys present it.
I mean, these guys are going to get hammered. I don't care what this attorney says about entrapment. They're going down. The interesting thing to me in all this, because we've had a lot of discussion about Osama bin Laden, the anniversary of the raid and all that, and Obama taking credit for this, that, and the other thing. This does underscore that there is a potential, as we've seen in this country before, for domestic terrorism, as well as the kind that is orchestrated from some overseas site.
This is not one guy like McVeigh. This was a group of guys that all shared this. So how concerned should we be that there is so much disdain right now for corporate America that more of these groups could rise up?
Well, McVeigh wasn't just one guy. I mean, let's not forget Terry Nichols played a role in this stuff too, and there were other people. I think, to Steve's point, which is absolutely correct, in this case, it's left-wing crazies. In McVeigh and Terry Nichols, it was right-wing crazies. In the case of the 9/11 attacks, the shoe bomber, the guy that's supposedly had all the explosives in Times Square, they had a different agenda. I think the entrapment discussion is interesting from a perspective of civil liberties, but thank God the FBI was in there and gave them fake explosives. Because even if they're knuckleheads get their hands on stuff like this. All you have to do is look at history. I mean, do you want to call Tim McVeigh as a knucklehead? He figured out how to wire up stuff, and there's a memorial, and there's lots of dead people in Oklahoma City because of it. So, the reasons don't matter. It's people that want to do other people harm. That's what you expect your police department to nip in the bud.
Well, and that's what I was going to say in terms of, it's rather reassuring, at least for me, that there are, number one, there are crazies out there, but it's reassuring to know that the FBI and Homeland Security and whatever, it's like they have their pulse on their ear to the pulse or their eye on the trigger, whatever. They seem to know this thing. They seem to find out when this is going to happen, and that's reassuring because there are a lot of crazy people out there. But this to me spoke about the fact that the FBI knows what's going on, has a way to find this stuff out, and does do their job and protect us.
Yeah, what is a little disturbing is when you start looking into motivations for things like this. I mean, obviously there are people who are just crazy that you really can't talk about corporate America or the gap in wealth in our society or religious fundamentalism or right-wing, left-wing. I mean, they're just nuts. And so you have to try to separate out who's just crazy and who might have some sort of political motivation or be tied into a larger organization. I mean, apparently these guys were really acting on their own. I mean, they were part of Occupy Cleveland, but
They weren't acting for Occupy.
Yeah. So you just when you delve into these things, you know what pushes someone over the edge. It's just, I think it gets hard to say.
You know, I mean, to be fair, there is a fine line about that. When you look at the Occupy protests last week, the vast majority of them are peaceful. The people that have a different view. Then there's the ones that want to go in and break windows. Then there's the ones that bring pepper gas in so they can aim it at police, and they do it because they want to be disruptive. There are right wingers that do that. You know, their version of that is they're going down the hills in West Virginia and they're stocking up.
Well, when we talk about the Occupy movement, we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, or in this case, the protesters out with the dome tents. But how do we not hold, how do some of these peaceful groups continue with what they're doing without having been, stigmatized by this?
Well, they were stigmatized by it. I mean, the fact that they had a protest planned in front of the General Electric Lighting Division in East Cleveland, I mean, and they were doing that with unions. Boy, the unions scattered out of there like wildfire. They were just done with that. They didn't want any part of it.
Yeah, and obviously, the next time Occupy Cleveland plans a Tea Party, or that's a bad metaphor,
no,
but
that was actually pretty funny. You just made someone spit out their coffee.
Any type of event, they're going to be probably more undercover agents at the event than there are Occupy movement people. I mean, they're going to be under the microscope from now on.
Well, and the next story that they do, that you have an Occupy story, it's going to, the fourth graph is going to be, by the way, this is Occupy Cleveland, and had 5 knuckleheads affiliated with it who are now facing charges.
Right.
And anybody who's associated with a protest group of this sort has got to make sure that their goals, their mission, their purpose in making a protest is in fact peaceful, because this can destroy a group more than anything else going. So
this is the same movement that was, the single biggest domestic story of 2011 was the Occupy movements across the country, both the riots in Oakland as well as the longevity in New York City.
And then winter hit.
Well, the other thing,
can they come back?
All kidding aside about, what do they want? I mean, the goals are so amorphous that it's just hard to get your arms around. I mean, I hate to break it to you, but corporate America isn't going to go away. So I don't know what they want. I mean, for all the criticism of President Obama, we're pretty far from a socialist system. I mean, if that's what these people even are dreaming of, is some type of redistribution of wealth. I mean, you talk about blowback. I mean, they'd have a real fight on their hands with that, I think. I mean, we can hardly devise an equitable tax structure in Congress, let alone go much beyond that. All
right. Well, we'll see how this plays. We'll see if the Occupy movements do come back in further editions right here on Newsnight.
On NewsNight.net, we cover a broader range of topics than we can on the air in 27 minutes. Be part of the conversation on our Facebook page and at NewsNight.net.
Keep your hands on the steering wheel. That's certainly what safety advocates have been preaching, but now the Ohio legislature wants to make it law. Anything but keep your hands on the wheel. No texting, no cell phone. I saw no iPads. I don't know how you can use your iPad and drive, but we had video last week of a guy shaving and driving. Jody, this is, the Senate and the this sounds good, but does it have any teeth at all?
Minimal. And from my perspective, I don't think it goes far enough. There are, I think it's 10 states now where you cannot use a cell phone. I wish they had gone that route. To get back to texting, all of us know what it's like to text while we drive. All of you have done it. I have done it. But
I bet you Steve's never done it.
Well, Steve's done it once or twice.
Only in dire emergencies.
But I'll tell you what.
But the star was closed.
I've been driving for years and years, and I don't think you can text, obviously, while drive safely. There is no way. So I'm glad the legislature is moving toward this step. The fact that, in fact, it's going to be outlawed and be a primary offense for anyone 18 and under, I think is very good, because normally young people have far more need, urge, whatever, although they're probably far better at texting than I would be. What I wish it had done is make it a primary offense for anybody, regardless of your age, because I think texting can be a terrible, terrible risk to everybody out there driving.
We should explain that for adults, this is a secondary offense, which means if they
They get pulled over because
some,
they went through a red light.
Right. You have to be stopped for something else. And, you know, to be honest, even when it is a primary offense, my guess is it's not going to be heavily enforced because it's hard. It's hard to see what someone's doing, and and if you're a police officer, you know, you're looking for probably other more serious things to deal with.
But there is a way to stop. If it is, in fact, against the law, I think that, in fact, goes a far way toward making people stop doing it.
That's the analogy that the state Senate is using. This bill's got to go back to the House. The House passed a similar bill, but they're different enough that they're going to have to reconcile, which shouldn't be a problem. They're both dominated by Republicans. They'll, you know, get this hammered out in about 5 minutes. But the analogy that's been made consistently in this debate is to the seatbelt law, which is that, you know, we don't hammer people for driving without a seatbelt necessarily, but it's in everybody's heads now that, you know, it's the law, you should wear your seatbelt. It's the law, you shouldn't, you know, be using these electronic devices, which are bad. And everybody knows they're bad.
Got any teeth to this?
I was doing such a good job agreeing with Jody up to now.
What an anomaly.
You know, I think Steve hit it on the head. I think it's PRBS. I mean, I think it's all about putting the issue out because it's the topic du jour. I love the fact that when I watch TV stations, yours included, and they have reporters who were reporting on this while the cars are running, and it's usually an MMJ, and there's usually a live unit in the back, and they're talking to a vast audience at the same time they're driving.
What idiot that goes to a cell phone
what
listening
idiot?
to a producer.
What idiot thought that up? You know, I mean, don't you have reckless driving laws on the books already? I mean, you know, if you're texting or doing something on there and they catch you and you're responsible for an accident and they can prove you're texting, can't they charge? You know, isn't there already a reckless driving on the statute? Aren't there other statutes they can enforce to do that? Why don't they enforce laws they already have? The only reason they're doing this is they can get some PR from it, and to Steve's point is like, well, it'll be top of mind and stuff like that, and everyone can feel good about themselves and go home and say they did something, when in fact they already had stuff on the books they could have enforced.
Well, I mean, I will be the first to admit in watching the legislature in action, whether it's Republicans or Democrats, you know, you got a whole pile of serious problems over here.
Yes.
They're going to take a long time that involve maybe money, and, you know, you're going to have a big fight, and then you got the layups over here, you know, and every once in a while you just let's just shoot a layup and
it's not layups, you know. I mean, people need jobs, bridges and roads need to be repaired, they need to fix the tax structure, and we're worried more about texting while driving and what happens to lions and tigers and bears. I mean, give me a break. What are we doing here?
Exactly. It's a systemic problem, I think, and I don't care whether it's the state legislature or whether it's the federal government. You know, they'll go for the slam dunks, as far as I'm concerned, to get the publicity rather than address the really egregious issues we have, whether it's in the state or in the country.
I mean, is it because we're idiots? Are we that easy to distract? I mean, this is all a magic act somewhere, and it's just, you know, it's just little David Copperfields and state houses all over the place. And, you know, I mean, while we're concentrating on the texting issue, we're ignoring the fact that 8% of people don't have jobs.
The short answer is yes.
Yes, absolutely. But I want to go back to the state and what I said at the beginning of this section. I wish the legislature had the chutzpah to instead of enacting a texting ban, okay, go with the other 10 states in this country who in fact have a hands-free,
right,
no cell phone use at all. You want to use your cell phone, it's got to be hands-free so that at least you've got both hands on the wheel and you're paying attention. You know, there's a lot to be said for not having to have that phone up here in your ear, have one hand on the wheel, and then all of a sudden you look down and that's it.
And there is some enforcement. My son lives in New York City, and
they enforce that rigorously.
And you know, he works in New Jersey, commutes into the city, and he'll stop the conversation before he gets into New York City because it's big. I don't know. I forget what the fine is, but it's big trouble, and they will stop you.
And comparing it to the seatbelts, you know, if you don't wear your seatbelt, you put your own life at risk. If you're texting while driving, you're putting my life at risk.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So I can understand that. But one of the things that stands out to me are we want people to keep their hands on the wheel because we're worried about them getting, you know, distracted, and yet more and more permits being issued every day for those digital billboards that change every 4 seconds, and some of them even have video that do nothing but take your eyes off off of the road.
Well, and I worry about people like Jody who talks with her hands. So, if she's talking to somebody, I mean, you look at how animated you are. How do you even drive with somebody else in the car?
Well, they sit in the back seat because my arm isn't long enough to reach
I mean, do
them.
they have to drive you because you're talking so much?
Be careful, there'll be a bill on this before you know it, and then they'll go to
It'll be the Jody Miller bill.
Then they'll go to putting on makeup, then they'll go to like eating a cheeseburger, and then the taco people.
Oh, hell, leave the cheeseburgers alone, for God's sake. Save the cheeseburgers.
Do you have a 5-speed by chance? I gotta watch his shift now.
You know what? I really don't. I really try not to talk on the phone when I'm driving because I can't concentrate. I'm getting to the point where I can't do two things at once anyway. But it's just I just try not to do it. Now there are times when I have, but again, pull off the side of the road. Go over there if you really have to find something. If you really have to text somebody, get off the main thoroughfare.
Right, and if it's an important enough message, chances are you're going to have to concentrate on what you're saying or texting anyway. So you might as well, as Jody's saying, pull over, do it right, not plow into somebody, be safe.
But is it, we've got about a minute to go. Is it reasonable, though, with the pressures that people are finding at work to multitask, and to multitask at home, that they take that same mentality with them when they get behind the wheel?
They're going to do this anyway. I know it's against the law. I know your son stops doing it when he's in New York. Do you think he's going to be still doing that 3 years from now?
Yeah, I think he will. I mean, that's not going to stop him. If he thinks he can get away with it elsewhere, he certainly will.
Because he does do it elsewhere. He doesn't do it in New York, but once he's across the bridge in New Jersey, all bets are off,
exactly,
right?
Exactly.
Okay.
So it creates more, but this new state law simply just creates some additional fines they can add when they're pulling you over for something else.
It's about public awareness. It's a PR campaign. That's it.
All right. We'd love to hear what you have to think about it.
No teeth.
Right there.
We'll
Jody,
text
Steve, Jody, Steve, and Ed, thank you so much for being us. Pull over and listen to the show on your iPhone. Don't do it while you're driving.
And don't touch the cheeseburgers.
Very serious. That'll do it for us this week. Have a great week, everybody. You can watch this broadcast again and interact with us over at newsnight.net. See you right here next Friday for Newsnight. Good night.